evening and welcome to Sharri. I'm Danica DiGiorgio. Here's what's coming up on the show. Is there trouble at the top of the Labor camp? Rumours of a rift between Albanese and Jim Chalmers intensify. My political insiders will give us the inside scoop. The fatal stabbing of a grandmother in Queensland should shock their Labor government into action. But residents say this is just another example of their new normal. Pauline Hanson joins the program to discuss the crime that's rocked the state. And the Reserve Bank is switching up their operations from today. How will this impact your next mortgage repayment? Terry McCrann will unpack all that shortly. But first, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was on a media victory lap today. He thinks Labor has successfully pulled the wool over our eyes when it comes to the Stage 3 tax cut lies.
At the end of the day, this has never been about the politics of polls or punditry. This is about real people and the pressure that they are under.
The latest news poll says 62% of voters believe the Prime Minister did the right thing, backflipping on his election pledge, despite the fact only 38% believe it will actually make a difference. This government thinks it's a slam dunk, but we have forgotten about this.
My word is my bond.
Who can forget it? The poll is actually a dud for the PM. It's the same 52 to 48 two-party preferred result as it was just before Christmas. Nothing has changed. What does that mean then? Well, what we already know. Albo is doing a shocking job because between now and July 1, when the changes come into effect, the family budget will still be strained. And this PM has done bugger all to help the cost of living crisis. You know, that thing that Albo keeps telling us about.
A plan to address cost of living, take pressure off cost of living, pressure off the cost of living, cost of living relief, downward pressure on cost of living. We are doing something about cost of living.
It's laughable, isn't it? Yet he doesn't do anything about it. Today, for example, the price of petrol increased. The fuel tax has risen from 48.8 cents per litre to 49.6 cents per litre. More pain in your hip pocket thanks to this government. They're basically Indian givers. Here, we'll give you an extra $15, but we're going to slog you at the Bowser. Every dollar counts right now. And the government's response is to push up the prices. Oh, and in case you didn't think they could get any worse, they're even coming after the car you drive. From January 1 next year, car makers will be forced to sell more electric and fuel-efficient vehicles into the Australian market or face financial penalties. This was Bridget McKenzie's take on it today.
So when we look at the EV equivalents that are available right now, so our most popular ute until last year when the Ranger took it over was the Hilux dual cab. You can get one of those for 52 grand. The equivalent EV ute, dual cab, is a Chinese model at $94,000. So whilst you may not be paying fuel excise if you go to an electric model, your family still has to find an additional $40,000 to purchase that car.
It's just going to cost you more. What's next from this mob? Seriously.
Positive polling, but does it pave the way for more broken promises?
Oh, I don't see it that way. You know, this is about a meaningful change to those Stage 3 tax cuts.
Seeing as this has worked so well, is that going to spur you on to break more promises?
Oh, no, I don't see it that way, Nat. You know, this is all about it becoming increasingly clear that we needed to provide more cost of living help.
Well, where is that cost of living help? Labor's words mean nothing, and we are still poorer for it. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Jo Hildebrand and host Liz Storer. Great to see you.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. Good. All right, look, we've got to start with this poll, Liz. You know, Labor's out there today patting themselves on the back thinking, look, we've done a great job. We're doing really well. have they read the polling? Realistically, Albo's popularity isn't as good as what he thinks.
And that's all that matters, right? So the measure, the changes to the tax cuts have proved popular. We knew this through the Essential poll last week, now through News poll today. That's not magic. That's not science. I mean, naturally, people like keeping a bit more of their own money, no matter how paltry the sum. But that's not translating to Albanese Robin Hood. It has not, the two-party preferred hasn't budged since December. But what it also tells you is that they're not necessarily punishing him for being an out-and-out liar, which they now know, and for many it's impacted their bottom line. Those who are over 200K now going, well, thanks for nothing. That's a genuine broken promise that I'm now paying for. It's not cost him. So it hasn't budged. It's not won him the popularity that they were hoping for, but it's not cost him.
Well, that's it. And the thing is that the changes are not going to come into effect until July 1, so we're all just sitting ducks waiting for it, Joe. This is the issue.
I just do not know what world people are living in if a government sitting on 52% is a bad result. He's taken a huge political gamble. He's broken a promise.
It wasn't a huge political gamble, though. We all know they poll these things to the back teeth before they do it. No government makes a risk.
You never know exactly what the fallout is going to be, and he knew that there was going to be a massive backlash.
The polling would have been forensic, and we both know.
Obviously, they would have known, what people like. But again, these things you never really know until you run it up the flagpole. And again, either if they knew the polling was so popular, how can you then say that it hasn't resulted in any kind of benefit for him? The primary vote actually went up by a point. And so more people, it's within the margin of error, but more people actually decided to vote Labor won. The two-party preferred is 52-48. That is actually higher than it has been in the past.
But it hasn't budged. His performance level slumped.
Since this move, it hasn't budged.
That's right. So people are saying, well, hang on, I don't quite trust him as much as I used to. But people don't really trust politicians at all anyway. And again, I'm one of those people who said, do not break this promise. You've got your credibility riding on it. You've got Labor's sort of credibility as the party of aspirational Australia riding on it. And then once they actually had and they redistributed those taxes and more poorer people, working people, middle people were getting more of a cut. I could not punch a hole in it. I just go, okay, well, that's it. I mean, it's just arithmetic. More people are getting more money. That's all she wrote.
Well, look, these tax cuts were heavily questioned today by the Senate Select Committee on the cost of living. They grilled Treasury officials on stage 3, asking when exactly they were made aware of the government's plans to break their key election promise. Victorian Liberal Senator Jane Hume took the lead on this.
But the first time that Treasury looked at this was after the 11th of December when you were tasked with the job by this Treasury Secretary. Is that right?
So we are always looking at these solutions, so I can't emphatically say it was the first time. We were conscious that it was a commitment of the government to implement stage 3, but as public servants, we will look at and provide advice. The expression frank and fearless.
But Anthony Albanese insists his decision to change the policy was not politically driven.
What we have done here is put people before politics, been prepared to make a difficult decision, had the courage of our convictions to advance the case for it.
Liz, the hearing was told it was Treasury who initially came up with that idea. But the problem is that Labor didn't fight to keep the tax changes.
Yeah, obviously the decision came down to them. But here's the thing, as far as I'm concerned, that's another massive lie because we know, thanks to the Capital brief, and they got this information through an FOI request, that Chalmers asked Treasury to cost the changes to tax cuts. The command comes from the boss. He asked Treasury, what would this look like if we did it? What are our options? Then Treasury gets busy. The idea now that he's like, oh, well, my department just threw this up and what could we do from then on? That's an out-and-out lie. Trying to pass the buck. Yeah, they're just piling up at the moment.
Look, absolutely. And how can Albo come out today and say it wasn't politically motivated? You can't say that Dunkley hasn't played a role in this.
Certainly Dunkley it'll be really interesting to see what happens in Dunkley. And if they don't hold Dunkley, they're in a world of pain. But I think they will, and I think that will be the kind of bellwether. In fact, that's what I'm writing my column about for tomorrow's paper, so spoiler alert. But,
Good
but
plug.
that will be the bellwether for the next general election. But again, is it politically motivated? Is it economically motivated? Is it motivated by, the well-being and happiness of the Australian people? All those things are essentially the same thing.
Every government is motivated by self-interest.
But of course it is. But if you're doing something that's good for the community, that's good for families, that's good for the economy, then people will vote for you. So, it's a virtuous circle, if you like. So, yes, the government wants to get re-elected. How does it get re-elected? By making people happy, by making sure the economy recovers. And if these do that, then you can't really argue with it. Again, I don't like the fact that we've had yet another broken promise in an era where political institutions have record low levels of support and faith, and we've seen people run to the extremes and all sorts of things. But having said that, on the pure sort of dollars and cents, it seems to be a political winner. And
well, I mean, that remains to be seen. Early days. I mean, still a long time between now and the election. But let's move on, because the Nationals are arguing the stick is better than the carrot when it comes to greedy supermarkets, saying there needs to be some discipline and punishment to force them to lower their prices.
The Nationals called for bringing forward the ACCC price monitoring inquiry into what we saw, that clear evidence on meat and fresh food. And we've said to the government, let's walk into Parliament tomorrow and let's bring in big stick legislation on the supermarkets to put them in their place straight away that would have an effect on making sure there's downward pressure on prices at the checkout and fair prices at the farm gate.
Joe, would big stick legislation work?
Yeah, look, I'm not a big fan of command economies. I tried that for about 90 years in this little place called Russia. It didn't work out too well. But I think I am more of a favour, and I've said this publicly and privately to people, but that there should be some kind of prices and wages accord where you actually sit down with business, unions and the government, as Hawke did in the golden age of the Hawke-Keating government, and say, right, inflation's a problem now. You keep saying that that wages are driving inflation higher and you don't want higher wages. Well, if you want to say that, then you should exercise some restraint on prices. And it's particularly salient with supermarkets because unlike a lot of other businesses, they actually thrived during COVID. They made billion-dollar bumper profits.
Well, all the little guys
they were one of the very
down.
few places that people could still go throughout the entire period. So given that this is a wake of COVID economic crisis, given that they made out like bandits, and given that it's about prices on the supermarket shelves that is at the heart of the cost of living crisis, why not sit down with workers, with government, and say, all right, we're going to wear some of the pain, let the put prices down, spend some of those prices, and people would like supermarkets more.
I think so too. I think so. But does government need to be tougher on this, do you think, Liz? I mean, they've already announced an inquiry. Is it going to go far enough?
I'm not convinced by this. We've seen this done before. I believe it was actually the Rudd government that did this, got the ACCC. It came to absolutely nothing. But the point is, as a consumer, why do you want to keep giving these flogs your money?
Totally.
Woolworths posted a $1.6 billion profit just last year. Coles $1.1 billion. They know they're gouging you at the checkout. They don't care. Why would you want to give your money to this massive duopoly that now thinks that they can just run roughshod over you? I keep telling everyone I know, go to farmers markets.
Absolutely.
Google it.
The problem is most people can't afford that.
Local.
The supermarkets still, because they have those economies of scale and because they can press farmers to sell them stuff cheaper as well, we know that. But it means that their goods are much, much cheaper. And in a cost of living crisis, most people can't afford to go to farmers markets.
Well, they're not that much cheaper anymore, Joe. That's the issue. That's why government's thinking, well, we got to step in, otherwise these guys aren't playing fair.
Yeah, they're certainly going up. Prices are going up, but you'll find supermarket prices are still much lower than farmers markets, boutiques, even smaller supermarkets. I guarantee I'm obsessed with
that. Depends on the market. I know some pretty good ones.
Maybe Dandenong Market, I reckon, would be cheaper than the supermarkets. But
worth the drive. Worth the drive.
Speaking of driving, well, the government now wants to dictate which car you drive under new vehicle efficiency standards. Honestly, Liz, can they just leave us alone when it comes to EVs and renewables?
100%. Let the record show Catherine King has effectively banned the Hilux, the Ford Ranger, the Land Rover. Never forget what Labor did to this country, because this is history in the making right here. And of course, we know it's going to drive car prices up massively, like they're not high enough already and people are suffering. But importantly, it's just going to place more load on a grid that is already not coping.
Absolutely. I mean, seriously, are they now telling us what car we need to drive, Joe?
Well, look, as someone who identifies as a future Ford Ranger owner, I just love them so much. But I think, again, Liz has sort of touched on the problem here. So what the government thinks is that because Australia doesn't have these emissions tests or these emission regulations that elsewhere does, I mean, you all know the famous one of Volkswagen in California gaming the system by having it run in the middle of a factory because everyone loves driving in a factory. But basically it means that car manufacturers have no real incentive to sell electric cars or a wide range of cheap competitive electric cars here because they can just dump all their gas guzzlers here because we don't have any regulations. So this is what the government's trying to fix. And that's great, good on them or whatever, but it doesn't solve the tyranny of distance. It doesn't solve the fact that, you know, every year, twice a year, in fact, we go to the same caravan park and I guarantee you, my Ford Falcon is the only non-Ranger in the caravan park. It is Ranger Hilux, Ranger Hilux, Ranger Hilux. Everywhere.
They're the grunty cars.
And they are towing caravans or they drive themselves.
Correct.
And if they don't
we don't have the infrastructure as well to support electric vehicles.
Period. So why are we setting ourselves up for failure? It's going to be abysmal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a shocker, really. Let's move on. The Palestinian protest movement is out leftying themselves. Can you believe it? Arguing about whether or not their cause is too white. Block the Dock Melbourne, who protest Israeli ships docking in Melbourne, are taking aim at Free Palestine Melbourne, calling them an embarrassment to the Palestinian community because it's run by 90% white people. Joe, I don't even know what to say. What are they saying here?
What they are actually doing is acting out the script of Monty Python's Life of Brian. They're too young and stupid to realise it. But it is. It's the People's Front of Judea versus the Judean People's Front. Yeah. And they're arguing over the most ridiculous minutiae, the stupidest thing. I mean, and I know I used to be a student socialist. I know exactly what these meetings sound like.
You criticised for being...
I remember once we spent something like 3 hours debating the colour of a T-shirt. It was
all the important things you do.
Phenomenal stuff. But again, the left, the extreme left, and these are lunar left, they will always eat themselves. And again, it's a sign, I suppose, of their overprivileged that they can sit down and have these ridiculous kind of esoteric debates about stuff that even in relation to the cause they're supposed to be passionate about doesn't matter at all. And this is the thing, they're going, oh, it's genocide, it's genocide, it's genocide. Well, if it's genocide, maybe you should stop arguing about whether or not someone is too white to be in a particular sub-faction of your stupid little inner city movement.
Correct. Well, this is why
Block the Dock, what's that? You're a bunch of dock blockers.
People stop listening.
100%, but we see this at Invasion Day rallies as well. 90% of the people there are white. So for once, I'd love all the white people to clear out so these people can see how small their movements are without the indoctrinated, guilt-ridden white folk who are just brainlessly waving their flags, don't even know, most of them, what they're standing for, what they're actually calling for.
Correct.
And then they'd be like, oh, wait, no, whiteies, come back.
No, but that's the thing. It's not about getting a result. It's not. They don't know the history. They don't know the policy. It's about ideological purity, which is why they have these debates about who's white.
I just want to get a quick final word from both of you on this. The Gold Coast Mayor is defying calls to ban G-string bikinis on the beach. Despite pleas from leaders of the community, the Gold Coast Volunteer of the Year, Ian Grace, has written to the Mayor demanding that skimpy swimwear is outdated. Look, Liz, we'll start with you. He reckons while any man would enjoy the view, he says, I believe women are very much demeaning and cheapening themselves.
I 100% agree with him. And this is just a common sense observation. If you see a woman from the behind wearing the getup that he's talking about, they are, forgive the pun, butt naked. They are completely butt naked. And when I see this generation of beautiful young women doing this, I just think to myself, you have been so lied to. This is not classy. This is not feminine. You have been raised in a porn-saturated culture, a sex saturation of culture. And what we also need to bring this back to is these are public places. We have laws about nudity in public places. We all know full well we can't strip off butt naked in, say, a supermarket or when you're on the train. And these are places that are frequented by families. And there's plenty of women out there who don't appreciate that.
I don't know if we should go to Joe.
Liz Storer, nanny state.
There's children. Why should we have kids?
Oh, come on.
Joe,
seriously, it's
do we dare get your view on it?
downright nudity.
This is a subject that's already got my view.
From you, Joe.
Bikinis,
The subject has got my view on it already.
Bikinis.
All right, go on, Joe.
I don't understand why suddenly we're so censorious and it's a nanny state.
Oh,
We're
you would
telling
enjoy
people
it,
what
though,
they can and
let's be
can't wear.
We've got to
You want
have
to ban the
some
burqa
standards.
and ban the bikini?
Nobody has a problem with bikinis. These are next level, and anyone who's seen them will agree. What are you adding? You have literally
It's not up for you to decide. It's for them. If they want to
you
dress
have
like
been
comfortable
lied
in
to
their
by
body.
a culture that says anyone who says that this is inappropriate, they're body shaming you. No, just have some self-respect.
But what happens if a pirate loses his eye patch?
Oh, wow. iPad, G-strings, very different topics, Joe Hildebrand, Liz Storer. Great to speak with you both.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for
Thanks,
joining
Nick.
us. Well, let's move on now to a really awful, tragic story. A 15-year-old boy from Queensland has been arrested in relation to the stabbing death of a grandmother in Ipswich this weekend. 15 years old. 70-year-old Violene White was allegedly killed in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter during the violent robbery at a shopping centre at the weekend. 2 other juveniles are in custody.
To kill an elderly 70-year-old woman in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter, to me, as I was described last night, it's abhorrent, it's violent, and it is a cowardly crime like I have not seen in my time as a detective.
The Queensland Government has wiped its hands clean of the youth crime crisis plaguing the state. It has no solutions. It has effectively buried its head in the sand. All the while, innocent people are being killed. One Nation leader, Pauline Hanson, joins me now live to discuss this. Pauline, words cannot even describe how horrific this is in broad daylight at a shopping centre. What's your reaction?
I'm absolutely devastated by it, Danica, and I feel for that 6-year-old child who actually witnessed this this crime and the murder of her grandmother. People have had enough in Queensland, and not in Queensland but Australia-wide. This has been brought to my attention time and time again about youth crime. It's out of control. State governments have no idea how to handle it, how to bring it under control. You know, when I grew up in this country, you would never hear anything like this. You wouldn't hear the youth crime that's going on, cars being stolen, houses being broken into. The pure, they're so just blatant about it. There's no fear. They've got no fear of anything. They're not fear of the court system. They're not fear of the police. There's no fear for the teachers or authority. There's no fear for their parents. This is all due to government policies and the bleeding, bloody hearts out there who think about the children's rights but don't teach them the responsibility that goes with it. It is a crying shame that this has happened, but people are rising up and they are saying, we have had enough. And I'll tell the people out there, we heard from the state government in Queensland 4 years ago about what they were going to do, clean up crime in Queensland. Nothing has happened. Nothing's changed. The detention centres are overflowing. It costs nearly $500,000 to actually keep one child in detention for a year. Our prisons are overflowing. Repeat offenders are on the rise. So what is the punishment? There is none. Until we get government legislation that is going to really get tough on these people and these children and youth crime, forget about the detention centres. They don't work. Get them into hard yakka. Get them out to country. Get them to actually do the hard yak. Teach them respect and responsibility and feel remorse for their actions and get their parents involved as well.
And I think you've raised a really good point. These kids, they're fearless. They're not scared of authority, and that is such a big issue. You know, we're talking about leadership on the matter. We know that there's a Queensland election this year. Yet, Pauline, it just feels like it isn't on the top of the list when it should be something that government needs to look at.
But I think it is on top of the list in the minds of people. Okay, you have the cost of living, but crime. Do you know there was one man who told my office, rang up my office, he said, we live in Townsville. He said, my wife was home by herself. He said 5 carloads of youths pulled up. She was terrified. They came in through the doors and windows. She locked herself in the bathroom while they ransacked the house. Now, this is going on all the time. You have the people that are held up, they're carjacked, their cars are taken, the elderly are frightened, you've got kids pulling out knives and machetes. What the hell is happening in this country? Why are we putting up with this rubbish? Where's the answers from the leaders of this nation? You know, Danica, I tell you what, One Nation, I have spoken about this for years and years and years. I'm sick of the rhetoric. I feel concerned for my own safety and that of my family, my friends, but the general public. And we have to have leadership in this fact. The police are not joining the police force. The police are fed up with arresting them. They're sick and tired of seeing the court system give them a slap on the wrist and release them.
Yeah.
Parents have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
There's a whole list of issues here that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, look, it is a frightening situation and it's just so terribly sad to see. Pauline, I want to move on because I want to talk to you a bit about federal politics. We know that there's been tension between Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers. In fact, Sharri reported only last Thursday that the Prime Minister was annoyed that he was the one taking the blame over stage 3 tax cuts. It's not uncommon for Treasurers and Prime Ministers to have tiffs over the years, but Pauline, the fact that the Prime Minister is reportedly briefing against his own Treasurer, have stage 3 tax cuts rocked this government?
Look, the general public, what I can understand, are quite happy for the tax cuts. It doesn't affect them. The general public do not really take a big interest in politics, you know. It's about what's going to affect me. Is it going to affect my hip pocket? No, it's not. I'm still getting the tax cuts. It's the higher echelons, the higher income earners that it's going to affect. So it's not going to put a dent in Anthony Albanese whatsoever. The coalition can go on that it's a broken promise, but I don't think it's going to make much difference to it. And the polls are showing that still 52 to 48% in Labor's favour. It is up to the coalition now. I have said I will pass the tax cuts because that's what we passed years ago. The majority of the people are going to get the tax cuts, but I will give an undertaking to the people out there. If I'm in a position to actually have the balance of power, whoever is government next time around, then I will then push for those tax cuts to be implemented as they were legislated for all Australians. Every Australian needs relief. Remember this also. The Labor government took away the tax cut of up to $1,500 for those income workers from $18,200 to $90,000 to $90,000. He took that up to $1,500 off them. So Anthony Albanese is not a man of his word. I don't trust him. And remember all the leaders. You had Hayden and Bill Hawke, you had Hawke and Keating, you've had Rudd and Gillard, you've had Howard Costello. They all have aspirations to become Prime Minister of this country. No difference between Albanese and Jim Chalmers. So I wouldn't be surprised there is some of to and froing going on behind the scenes.
I guess the issue is, as you mentioned, though, everyone needs a tax cut, sure, but this wasn't the tax cut that they were promised.
No, it's not. But it was a coalition that passed the tax cuts. And right up to this point of time, Albanese has said, you will get your tax cuts. He's gone back on his word, even though it was legislated for. Danica, we see this all the time. Legislation has changed, whether it be with AUKUS, the submarines, whether it be the climate change policies, whether it be IR bills. You know, people are actually keep pushing the government. The Greens are pushing government for different policies. So governments change their legislation, their policies. So basically, what we have to consider, myself as a senator, in passing this legislation, is it going to assist those Australians out there who are doing it tough? Do they need that tax relief? Yes, they do. But bracket creep is going to put a lot of these Australians back into the fact they're going to be paying more tax over the next 10 years and the government will reap another $28 billion out of it. So, you know, we need tax relief in this country. And whether we actually do income splitting, we do a flat tax, we need tax relief for the Australian people.
Yeah, all right. Well, look, it's going to be a big week with Parliament resuming for the year tomorrow. Pauline Hanson, good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us. Coming up after the break, mortgage holders are bracing for tomorrow's first rate decision of the year. What will the RBA do? Terry McCrann will join us after this. Welcome back to the program. Well, the Reserve Bank will decide tomorrow whether to increase or slash rates for the first time this year. Inflation has fallen to 4.1%, but not close enough to the RBA's wish of between 2 and 3. Joining me now is business writer for the Herald Sun, Terry McCrann. Terry, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. What's your feel? Is it too early to slash rates?
Danica, I think the decision tomorrow is absolutely clear-cut. The Reserve Bank will leave rates unchanged. I personally think that it should cut by 25 basis points. And the reason I say that is because I think it was wrong to increase rates by 25 basis points on Cup Day. So it really should fess up that it got it wrong. We didn't need that extra rate hike, and therefore it's undoing it. But I think that would be a step too far. And the reason I say it should do that is because it thought when it made that rate hike in November that inflation was still significantly higher than it was actually going to be. We got a much lower figure for inflation in the December quarter than the Reserve Bank had been expecting. So it raised rates anticipating it still had a tough inflation problem. Yes, you said inflation at 4.1 is still too high, but it is coming down. It is coming down much faster than the Reserve Bank thought. The important thing about tomorrow, Danica, is not so much the decision in all this, but what the Reserve Bank says. First, what Michelle Bullock says in the statement, the normal statement, after the meeting, and then an hour later when she holds the first ever press conference to expose herself to questioning from people like me.
Yeah, see, this is going to be interesting tomorrow, Terry, because they've never done this before. The RBA has never held a press conference after any of its announcements. But tomorrow, Michelle Bullock will have to front the media after they make their decision. Is it fair enough that they come out and explain their decision to mortgage holders and let them know how they've come to that decision?
Well, absolutely, Danica. I mean, it's what every other central bank governor does everywhere else in the world, in America, in the UK, in Europe, and indeed in Japan. But more importantly, I think, at this precise moment in time, we are at this critical pivot point. The Reserve Bank and all the other central banks have spent the last 2 years talking about rate hikes. Maybe we'll have to hike again. Maybe we'll have to hike considerably higher than we think that rates are now. All the other central banks have moved to a pivot. They've now stopped talking about future rate hikes. They're talking about rate cuts. Mightn't have delivered rate cuts yet, but they're talking about rate cuts. Our Reserve Bank, the last thing it said was in December, and it was still talking about rate hikes. So it's critically important for Michelle Bullock to tell us that the Reserve Bank is now focused on thinking about rate cuts. Won't happen tomorrow, but it should happen not in the too distant future. And then she needs to explain the thinking, because it's a delicate balance. She doesn't want people to think, and particularly homeowners, that rates are going to be slashed and their mortgage repayments are going to be halved dramatically in the course of the year. She has to chart a very difficult course because, as you said, inflation is still too high. And a lot of people out there will say immediately, I'm still suffering from high inflation. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do think that, Terry. Let's move on to stage 3 tax cuts. Of course, Parliament resumes this week. The Greens have a list of demands to get this through, and the coalition will meet tonight to decide whether to oppose it or not. What do you think they'll do here?
I think they'll end up allowing it to go through, Danica. And when you talk about the Greens having their demands, I'm almost thinking, let the coalition approve. The last thing we want is another Greens-Labor deal where you get all sorts of other nasties. Thank you very much from the Greens. The brutal reality of what the government has done, yes, they broke their promise, but it's a popular breaking of the promise ultimately, because it's taking money from about 5 million taxpayers and giving it to about 11 million taxpayers. And we've seen the polling indicate that, it's a vote winner. Brutally, it's cynical and it's a broken promise, but it is a vote winner. And it's going to have an impact very much, because come July 1, 11 million Australians will actually get a rise in their pay, in their net take-home pay when those tax cuts flow through, and they'll have that rise every week, more money in their pay packets every week through to the election next March. Put that together with likely lower repayments on home loans, and it's a fairly seductive package.
It's still a long way away, though. That's, it's still July 1 and hasn't done a lot for his popularity as well, according to that latest news poll. Terry McCrann, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Joining us after the break, the columnist who exposed the rift between Albanese and Chalmers. He'll give us the latest on the trouble plaguing Labor's paradise. Plus, political insider Andrew Carswell gives his predictions on the week ahead as Parliament opens its doors for another year. Could we have a new Prime Minister by the end of the year? That's next. Welcome back to Sharri. I'm Danica Di Giorgio. Well, the Treasurer was out today assuring us that he and the PM are good mates, best friends for life, and there's no rift over the Stage 3 tax cut backflip.
There's a report out this morning that Anthony Albanese is annoyed to be taking the fall for you over this broken promise. How's your relationship with the PM?
Very close and effective working relationship. We're good mates. We had dinner last night. We had breakfast at the Lodge not that long ago. We speak on an almost daily basis. I've seen those stories. They are absolute rubbish.
Very close, he says. For more, I'm now joined by two political insiders, Director at GXO Strategies, Cameron Milner, and Director of Headline Advisory, Andrew Carswell. Thank you to both of you for joining us. Cameron, we'll start with you.
Thank you.
You're the one who dropped that bombshell last week that the relationship was shredded and that the pair were not speaking. Do you stand by that?
Absolutely. It was well briefed from their cabinet colleagues directly to me. But credit where credit's due. Sharri actually broke this story on the 25th of January. She was the one who started the story about the tension that was there and all the background briefing that was going on. And last Thursday, she closed out with the Prime Minister's retort that he was shitty with his treasurer. There's all manner of people talking about what's going on between these two. But didn't you love the fact they had to have a date night to tell everyone it was all okay? go to the Lodge and DJ Albo put on, Tammy Wynette's, Stand By Your Man as the after dinner song. Look, it's all a bit of theatre because, unfortunately for the two of them, there's huge tension between them because the Prime Minister broke his word and Jim Chalmers got what he wanted, which was Stage 3 tax cuts.
Yeah, I wonder if they held hands at that dinner as well together.
I'm sure it was candlelit, yes.
A candlelight dinner, how beautiful for the two of them. Andrew, how can the pair come back from this, or are Jim Chalmers' ambitions for office too much for the Prime Minister to ignore?
Well, I think ambition is the right word there. I think, look, here's a tip. If you're putting together a glossy TV ad with warm and fuzzy music and you're the star of the show and you're talking about yourself and your policy achievements and your background, you're auditioning to become PM. And that's what we've seen from the Treasurer in recent days with this glossy ad. He wants to be PM. So that is part of the tension that we're seeing. I know there's a conga line of pretenders and contenders on the right of politics that think they want to become PM and think they have the numbers. I can assure you Jim's nowhere near the top of that list. But there is a tension in terms of his political future, but there's also the tension that he's just basically consigned the PM to having a year of character assassination from the coalition, a year of torment, a year of teasing from those opposite for the backflip that he had on tax. And we know that this was not a decision that the Prime Minister wanted to do. He was dragged kicking and screaming by the Treasurer himself, who asked Treasury to look at this in December. So here we have another issue where there's a weakness on behalf of the PM. He can't stand up to Jim Chalmers on tax. He can't stand up to Tony Burke on IR and the folly of the IR policy currently being put before the Parliament. He can't stand up to Penny Wong on Gaza and Israel. The only person he can stand up to is Richard Marles, the Defence Minister. But that's like, trying to disarm someone coming at you with a plastic knife.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, you are the leader, you're the top of your department. You need to be able to control everyone and be able to have these serious conversations, but he just simply can't. Let's move on now because, of course, Parliament returns tomorrow. Cameron, how much will Stage 3 tax cuts dominate and the Prime Minister's lies on this?
Well, I think the Peter Dutton is about to announce, if he hasn't already, that they're going to match the tax cuts. And if they don't today or tomorrow, that'll be the case. And then suddenly the tax cuts are off the table because both sides of politics, both major parties agree that people deserve a tax break. And it all comes back to the Prime Minister's credibility and what next he'll lie about. And that's the problem for the Prime Minister. I agree with you, Andrew. I mean, his credibility is shredded and shot after the broken commitment that he made so many times and as recently as only a week and a day before he broke his promise. So, no, I think the credibility of the Prime Minister is going to be front and centre for this next term of time because the tax cuts will be agreed to by both sides.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, of course, the coalition is meeting tonight to decide whether they will back it or not. And by all indications, as you said, it looks like it will actually go ahead. Andrew, is this a good opportunity? Yep. It could be. And Andrew, but is this a good opportunity as well for Peter Dutton? Is he going to have to come out now with his own plan for tax reform?
Well, he's going to have to do something here. I think Labor have stolen the march on him and regained the political ascendancy heading into the first sitting week. The coalition just ummed and ahed a bit too long in the process when this plan was announced by Labor. They were caught flat-footed, and it took a couple of days to kind of get their lines together and get their angle clear on this, which allowed the Prime Minister to regain the political ascendancy. So there's a little bit of a fault there from the Liberal Party. Maybe they didn't see that coming. So really, and we've seen from the polling at the weekend that people like the plan. They think he was okay to make the decision in the reasons that he gave, but they still don't like the fact that he lied about it. So that is that final point is what the coalition have to prosecute, and not just throughout this week, but for the weeks and months ahead leading into next year's election.
Absolutely, they're going to have to go really hard on that. Yeah, keep going.
I was just going to say, News poll was a dead cat bounce for the Prime Minister. 8 out of 10 people got a tax cut going forward, 8 out of 10, and his reward was that much in the polls. Why?
Correct.
Because he broke his commitment. That was the balancing act.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. Jim Chalmers can come out today and do his victory lap, but there is no victory because essentially nothing changed in those polls. So, look, it's going to be a very interesting week. Let's move on now because Australian academic and pro-democracy blogger Yang Hengjun has been given a suspended death sentence by a Chinese court. In a press conference today, the Foreign Minister Penny Wong outlined that there were still some avenues of appeal.
The Australian government is appalled at this outcome. We will be communicating our response in the strongest terms. As a first step, I have directed my secretary to summon China's ambassador to Australia to express our objection. I want to acknowledge the acute distress that Dr. Young and his family will be feeling today, coming after years of uncertainty.
Cameron, we keep hearing about this so-called thawed relationship between Australia and China, but is this not a clear example that the relations are not as good as what they may seem?
Well, and it shows you what China's really like. They had a one-day show trial for this person who was pro-democracy, who was wanting what we're all passionate about, being democratic as well. So, look, I like that Penny Wong was concerned. I'm more worried, though, that the gentleman's two sons wrote to Anthony Albanese and asked Albanese to raise this directly with Xi. And he didn't. He didn't raise the submarine. He didn't raise this issue. He just wanted to be the handsome boy. And that's what worries me about the relationship between this Prime Minister and the Chinese. And we're seeing live example of the sort of regime we're dealing with in China through this awful, awful decision today.
Absolutely. It's such a sad decision. We're almost out of time, but Andrew, final word from you on this. Does it further strain relations?
Well, I think it's a brutal reminder that all is not well in the relationship, and we're almost like back to reality here. I mean, gone are the days of the walk down the Shanghai Bund, the pig-facts with holding up bottles of wine and seafood as well. We're back to reality here, and it's maybe not a reality that the Labor Party are used to, but it's certainly a return to normality, which is quite alarming.
It is very alarming. Andrew Carswell, Cameron Milner, great to speak with you both. Thanks for joining us. Well, stay with us. Still to come. The US ramps up its offensive in the Middle East and the West could be asked to help. That's next. Welcome back. Well, the US and the UK have carried out joint airstrikes against Houthi rebels in response to a lethal drone attack on a US base in Jordan last week. A spokesman for the Iran-backed group has vowed to continue its campaign of disrupting regional trade, no matter the sacrifices. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Garda. Kosha, thanks for joining us. Look, this is escalating daily. Has Joe Biden lost control of the situation? We're seeing strike after strike, and yet nothing is working to stop this group.
It certainly seems to be reactive in nature. And I guess in fairness to Joe Biden, Danica, we could say that it's reactive to consequences that are really, really downstream from public policy decisions that should have probably been reevaluated over the course of the past couple of decades, well before Biden. So I can tell you back home in the US, people are increasingly questioning why we even have so many bases still all across the Middle East and have our troops be sitting ducks, or why did global supply chains orient themselves in a way that this region has become such a choke point for so much global trade when we know that it's susceptible to this kind of action, and so on and so forth. So there could have been more done upstream, but we are where we are right now, and it certainly seems like a little bit of just a needling here and there, but nothing that's changing the picture overall, and I expect to see this kind of escalation continue.
Yeah, it's certainly a worry, that's for sure. Look, let's move on. It's no surprise that border chaos has erupted under the Biden administration. Take New York, where luxury hotels are being converted into mass-scale migrant shelters. And now New York City officials are launching a $53 million program to hand out prepaid credit cards for migrant families. Kosha, it's no doubt an issue dividing the United States. Will there ever be bipartisan support on solving this crisis?
You know, here's a funny thing, and you put your finger on it. It has long been an issue dividing the United States, but now it's actually become an issue that's unifying. It's one of the few issues that's unifying the constituents, because those things that you mentioned, like the New York City credit cards or hotels being converted, or a school was even sent into homeschooling so that it could be repurposed for a shelter in a deep blue state. It's really unifying the country where they don't want this anymore. And they see, 8 million people pouring in over the last administration as completely unacceptable in terms of how a country could be run. Yet the leaders, the legislators in Congress and in the Senate, both from the left and from the right, just continue to not really meet their constituencies where they want it. And so over there, you see that gridlock and that infighting, even though most of the base of the country, the electorate, wants something done. And it's really interesting to watch. It's really escalating because you have the states suing the feds and all sorts of things are happening on this. I think it's actually turning into the #1 issue in the election.
Well, it's interesting because Donald Trump says that this issue could actually flip traditional blue states. So how do you see this issue impacting the November election?
You know, it's really tough to flip blue states, and we can see that California, after it turned blue, since Ronald Reagan in 1984 never voted red again. But Donald Trump had a little bit of success with that. He did flip Wisconsin after 40 years of Republicans losing the state on similar issues, on the broader topic of immigration, among others. And that whole thing is just now reaching a fever pitch for the reasons we're discussing. So I do think it's going to play in. It's hitting people, at home, in their school districts, at the kitchen table, and that kind of stuff might sort of motivate those swing state voters a little bit. But when push comes to shove, what we're seeing in recent years is the U.S. electorate is just really divided ultimately, and I'm not sure how much that's going to happen, but it is going to play in some shape or form. I just don't know how much.
Speaking of the US election, every week politicians are trying to outdo each other. Sometimes, though, embarrassingly so. Just take a look at Nikki Haley on SNL.
My question is, why won't you debate Nikki Haley?
Oh, my God, it's her, the woman who was in charge of security on January 6th. It's Nancy Pelosi.
For the 100th time, that is not Nancy Pelosi. It is Nikki Haley.
Are you doing okay, Donald? You might need a mental competency test.
Oh, look, Kosha, Nikki's out there testing her skills. Perhaps she can take over from SNL if she loses here. What do you think of this? Realistically, is it actually going to sway voters her way?
No, I think she's in it for something bigger, just raising the platform, positioning herself for some future position. She knows that. Everybody knows that. She is young. She's 30 years younger than the other two candidates at the front of both parties. So, that's one thing she can play to. But she just doesn't have a natural constituency, again, because the centrists in the general will vote for the Democrat. In general, they're not going to go for her, even if they do in the primary. And in the primary, you can't win a Republican primary only with centrists. You need that core base of Republicans, and they're in love with Trump, and they're not swaying.
Well, that's it. Trump is increasing his lead over Biden, and he's also revealed his own criteria for the perfect VP. He name-dropped Senator Tim Scott, but also Kristi Noem. Who do you have your money on here?
I don't think it's either of those two. You never know with Trump. It'll be some wild card or somebody that we don't expect potentially, or it'll be a governor or some up-and-comer, I think, that we don't know. I don't think it's one of those two.
All right, well, look, it's fascinating as always. Kosha Garter, good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thank you for joining me tonight. Now, here's Paul Murray.